Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zum diesjährigen Mediendialog im Hamburger Rathaus. Wie Sie wissen, hat es seit dem letzten Mediendialog im vergangenen Jahr zwar einen Wechsel im Amt des ersten Bürgermeisters gegeben, damit ist aber, wie auch in den anderen Bereichen der Senatsarbeit, kein Richtungswechsel verbunden. Nicht in der Medienpolitik und damit auch nicht in dem Streben Hamburgs, in der Medienordnung auf der Höhe der Zeit zu sein. Medienpolitik bleibt ein zentrales Politikfeld des Senats. Dafür bürgt schon der hierfür zuständige Senator Carsten Broster, mit dem ich in den letzten Wochen viel über die aktuellen Themen seines Ressorts gesprochen habe. Die Frage nach den richtigen Rahmenbedingungen für unsere demokratische Öffentlichkeit hat nichts von ihrer Dringlichkeit verloren. Erst vor wenigen Wochen hat Julia Jäkel bei der Verleihung des Henry-Nannen-Preises darauf hingewiesen, dass wir vermeintliche Gemeinplätze mittlerweile wieder laut aussprechen müssen, um uns ihrer Gültigkeit zu vergewissern. Das ist ein wertvoller Hinweis, denn Sprechen und Denken ist eine Einheit und wir müssen daran denken, dass wir in Zeiten leben, in denen hunderte Journalistinnen und Journalisten wegen ihrer Arbeit im Gefängnis sitzen. In Zeiten, in denen selbst europäische Nachbarländer schwarze Listen mit unliebsamen Medien und Redaktionen schreiben, müssen wir aussprechen, dass freier Journalismus einen unverzichtbaren Beitrag für eine demokratische Kultur leistet. Wir müssen im Rahmen der Europäischen Union fordern, dass unsere gemeinsamen demokratischen Werte, das Meinungs- und Pressefreiheit, überall gelten und Wirkung entfalten. Und in Zeiten, in denen ein US-Präsident nahezu täglich recherchierende und kommentierende Journalisten angreift, müssen wir aussprechen, dass die Vernunft einer Gesellschaft nicht durch die Tweets Einzelner entsteht, sondern in der Vielfalt ihrer Stimmen liegt. Es ist eine zentrale journalistische Aufgabe, diese Vielfalt, auch ihre Widersprüche und Konflikte sichtbar zu machen und darüber zu berichten. Wir können froh sein, dass unsere bundesdeutsche demokratische Kultur in ihrem Kern nach wie vor stark ist und wir solche Erosionen im eigenen Land bisher nicht beklagen müssen. Aber wir dürfen uns nicht darauf verlassen, sondern wir müssen uns darum kümmern, dass es so bleibt. Dem sollen auch unsere Diskussionen auf dem Hamburger Mediendialog heute und morgen dienen. Es ist gerade einmal 100 Jahre her, dass die Meinungsfreiheit wirksam in Deutschland erstmals rechtlich verankert wurde. Heute sichern wir nicht nur die individuelle Freiheit der Meinungsäußerung, sondern wir haben zugleich einen leistungsfähigen medienrechtlichen Rahmen, der ausgehend von der Presse- und Rundfunkfreiheit auch die institutionellen Vorkehrungen einer vielfältigen demokratischen Öffentlichkeit sichert. Diese Medienordnung hat über Jahrzehnte hinweg die demokratische Kultur unseres Landes mitgeprägt. Aber, um es mit den bekannten Worten von Willy Brandt zu sagen, nichts kommt von selbst und nur wenig ist von Dauer. Darum, so fordert Brandt, besinnt euch auf eure Kraft und darauf, dass jede Zeit eigene Antworten will und man auf ihrer Höhe zu sein hat, wenn Gutes bewirkt werden soll. Auf der Höhe der Zeit zu sein, heißt angesichts der technischen und gesellschaftlichen Umbrüche in der Medienwelt, dass wir den rechtlichen Rahmen der medialen Ordnung weiterentwickeln müssen, wenn wir denselben Anspruch an demokratische Öffentlichkeit haben wie in der Vergangenheit. Das ist keine leichte Aufgabe, denn es fällt auf, wie weit die Bewertungen der digital entstehenden Informationsmöglichkeiten auseinandergehen. Während die einen den Free Flow of Information und die ungehinderten Chancen auf Kommunikation und Vernetzung preisen, beklagen die anderen Filterblasen, Datenskandale und Echokammern. Das ist die Komplexität der Lage. Die zentralen Veränderungen in der Medienwelt sind so ambivalent wie ihre Bewertungen. Wir müssen deshalb einen regulatorischen Rahmen schaffen, der die positiven Potenziale stützt und ihre destruktiven Wirkungen begrenzt. Es geht im Kern um den Umgang mit den neuen digitalen Technologien, die die Möglichkeiten der Kommunikation und der Information für jeden Einzelnen unglaublich erweitert haben und deren Freiheits- und Teilhabeversprechen eine große Faszination ausübt. Unsere heutige Keynote-Sprecherin Zeynep Tufekci schreibt über eine frühe Begegnung mit den Möglichkeiten von Social Media den Satz: "It was hard not to be hopeful." Digitale Netzwerke erscheinen im ersten Angang von großer informatorischer Kraft, können aber am Ende schwächer sein als angenommen. Sie können nämlich dazu führen, dass nicht nur neue kommunikative Möglichkeiten entstehen, sondern auch neue Einschränkungen und Blockaden. Ein Grund dafür sind die sogenannten Intermediäre, also digitale Netzwerke und Suchmaschinen, die eine große praktische Bedeutung haben in der Informationsvermittlung, die aber anders als bei klassischen Medien nicht mehr in erster Linie von professionellen Redaktionen gestaltet werden, sondern über technische Algorithmen. Das heißt, in der schönen neuen digitalen Welt beantworten technische Algorithmen die Frage, was eine Nutzerin oder ein Nutzer konkret interessieren mag und was er zur Kenntnis bekommt. Die Grundgesamtheit der Auswahl umfasst zwar die ganze Vielfalt verfügbarer Informationen und Meinungen, vom adrenalingesättigten Facebook-Post bis zum monatelang im Team recherchierten Artikel der New York Times. Der zugrunde liegende Maßstab für die Informationsauswahl ist dabei aber nicht zwangsläufig die inhaltliche Qualität oder der Wert der Informationen, sondern zum Beispiel eine vermeintliche individuelle Passgenauigkeit für den konkreten User. Mit anderen Worten, wer wiederholt eine bestimmte Auswahl an Inhalten im Netz getroffen hat, der wird diese Inhalte auch in Zukunft öfter finden und andere Sichtweisen weniger, wenn Suchalgorithmen ihm diese als passgenaue Informationen spezifisch aus der Grundgesamtheit vorhandener Daten auswählen. Der Nutzer wird dann auch nicht bemerken können, wenn es nur wenige Urheber dieser Informationen gibt und wenn viele falsche Profile oder Bots den Anschein der Masse erst erzeugen. Noch sind solche die Informationsfreiheit einschränkenden Mechanismen vielleicht die Ausnahme. Aber sie dürfen auch nicht die Regel werden, wenn wir die Vielfalt der Öffentlichkeit erhalten wollen, die unsere Demokratie braucht. Es ist deshalb entscheidend, dass wir eine mediale Ordnung sichern, in der redaktionelle Medien ihren festen Platz haben, um Verzerrungen durch digitale Teilöffentlichkeiten entgegenzuwirken und uns bewusst mit der Vielfalt, dem Widerspruch, dem anderen Argument zu konfrontieren, denn erst daraus entsteht echte demokratische Kommunikation. Um diese zu erhalten, ist es wichtig, dass wir Regeln entwickeln, um auch in Zukunft Wettbewerb, publizistische Vielfalt und kommunikative Chancengleichheit zu sichern. Die Länder sind hierzu auf mehreren Themenfeldern in der Diskussion. Auch zu der Frage, wie wir künftig mit Plattformen und Intermediären, also den neuen digitalen Mittlern, umgehen. Der Rundfunkstaatsvertrag ist dabei ein geeigneter Ansatzpunkt für regulatorische Vorgaben. Er spannt den gesetzlichen Rahmen, innerhalb dessen wir die öffentliche und demokratische Kommunikation in unserem Land organisieren. Wenn wir die aktuell erörterten Modernisierungen verabschieden, entwickelt sich der Rundfunkstaatsvertrag schrittweise zu einem umfassenderen Medienstaatsvertrag. Die Medienpolitik der Länder wird sich damit nicht mehr alleine auf den Rundfunk beschränken, sondern die neuen Strukturen medialer Öffentlichkeit generell in den Blick nehmen. Dieser Perspektivwechsel ist nötig, aber wir brauchen die Einigkeit aller 16 Länder, um ihn auf Dauer vorzunehmen. Das kann im Föderalismus nur gelingen, wenn sich alle Beteiligten bemühen und auch gemeinsam den Willen aufbringen, diesen Schritt konsequent zu gehen. Damit würde die Bedeutung und die Rolle von Intermediären wie Google oder Facebook für die öffentliche Meinungsbildung erstmals regulatorisch erfasst. Dazu gehört, dass wir die professionellen Mechanismen der Relevanzbewertung anerkennen. Das Auswählen und Gewichten von Inhalten ist gerade das Geschäftsmodell bestimmter Intermediäre und es wird vom Kommunikationsgrundrecht aus Artikel 5 unseres Grundgesetzes geschützt. Wir sollten aber verlangen, dass Intermediäre die wesentlichen Kriterien ihrer Aggregation, Auswahl und Präsentation von Informationen offenlegen, um überprüfbar zu sein und um das Vertrauen der Nutzerinnen und Nutzer in ihre Angebote zu stärken. Ob und wie weit darüber hinaus auch Nichtdiskriminierung vorgeschrieben werden muss, zum Beispiel ab einer bestimmten Stellung im Hinblick auf die Markt- oder Meinungsmacht des digitalen Mittlers, ist eine weitere Frage. Es werden bald Vorschläge auf dem Tisch liegen, mit denen die ersten Schritte in Richtung einer konvergenten Medienordnung gegangen werden können. Sie orientieren sich bewusst nicht an kurzfristig aufkommenden Überlegungen, die zum Beispiel nach dem jüngsten Cambridge Analytica-Skandal formuliert wurden, sondern knüpfen an die systematische Arbeit der Bund-Länder-Kommission für konvergente Regulierung der Medien an. Dass die Vorschläge nicht den Anspruch haben, alle Probleme auf einmal zu lösen, spricht ausdrücklich für sie. Eine Medienwelt, die sich dynamisch und agil entwickelt, werden wir nur mit einer ebenso agilen und dynamischen Media Governance begleiten können, die allgemeine Grundsätze festschreibt, aber die konkreten Regeln eher in kleinen, schnellen Schritten vorgibt. Voraussichtlich im Sommer werden Sie als Medienvertreter die Möglichkeit haben, die Ideen kennenzulernen und ihre Meinung in den Länderkreis zurückzugeben. Ich hoffe, dass dies dann auch für die Neugestaltung der Regelungen zum sogenannten Telemedienauftrag der öffentlich-rechtlichen Sender gilt, an dem die Länder lange arbeiten. Die meisten Modernisierungsschritte sind schon vereinbart. Dazu gehören umfangreichere und längere Verweildauern für ausgestrahlte Inhalte, also die Verlängerung der sogenannten 7-Tage-Regel und flexiblere Möglichkeiten für die Anstalten, Inhalte nur für das Internet zu produzieren. In diesen Fragen ist eine Abwägung zwischen den Interessen des öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunks, der Nutzerinnen und Nutzer und der privaten Medienanbieter vorgenommen worden. Offen bleibt noch die Frage, wie künftig mit den vor allem auch textbasierten Angeboten des öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunks umgegangen werden soll. Insbesondere die Verlagshäuser wehren sich gegen presseähnliche Angebote ihrer beitragsfinanzierten Konkurrenz, während die öffentlich-rechtlichen Sender weitere Möglichkeiten wünschen, um den digitalen Wandel ihrer Produkte zu bewältigen. Viele Formulierungen für den Staatsvertrag sind hierzu ausgetauscht worden. Keine hat Konsens unter den Ländern erzielen können. Ob das bis Juni gelingt, wird sich zeigen. Um voranzukommen, sollten wir aber die bereits vereinbarten Modernisierungsschritte des Telemedienauftrags jetzt umsetzen und nur in dem noch nicht befriedeten Bereich die alte Regelung belassen. Eine Klage vor dem Bundesverfassungsgericht zum Verstoß gegen das Presseähnlichkeitsverbot ist ohnehin anhängig, sodass wir in absehbarer Zeit mit höchstrichterlicher Hilfestellung bei der Einordnung dieses Themas rechnen können. Agilität ist in der Medienpolitik ohnehin ein gutes Prinzip. Die Medienwelt entwickelt sich schnell weiter, die Medienordnung muss es deshalb auch tun. Das gilt auch für den künftigen Auftrag und die künftige Struktur des öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunks. Die Diskussion unter der Überschrift Auftrag und Strukturoptimierung vollzieht sich seit geraumer Zeit und wird stark von finanziellen Erwägungen überlagert. Auf der einen Seite von der 17,50 € Fraktion unter den Ministerpräsidenten, auf der anderen Seite von Intendanten, die nonchalant mehrere Milliarden mehr an Mitteln verlangen. Bevor wir aber über Geld reden, sollte man zunächst die Erwartungen und damit den Auftrag des öffentlich-rechtlichen Systems klären, und zwar möglichst grundsätzlich. Der öffentlich-rechtliche Rundfunk braucht eine belastbare Legitimationsgrundlage und er findet sie ausdrücklich nicht bloß als Ausfallbürgschaft oder in einer Rolle als Ausfallbürgschaft für Vielfaltsdefizite im privaten Rundfunk, sondern als systemische Alternative zu diesem privaten Rundfunk. Dadurch stehen zwei Organisationsprinzipien medialer Inhalteproduktion, das privatwirtschaftliche und das öffentliche rechtliche, zueinander im Wechselspiel, um nicht zu sagen in Konkurrenz. Dies verringert die Zahl und die Größe blinder Flecken unserer gesellschaftlichen Selbstbeobachtung. Würde eine solche Alternative und Konkurrenz noch nicht bestehen, müsste man sie jetzt erfinden und nicht nur neu gestalten. Angesichts der Dynamik medialer Umbrüche wäre es plausibel, die Beauftragung öffentlicher Angebote von der allzu konkreten Beschreibung einzelner Leistungen abzurücken und auch hier lieber die Prinzipien zu klären, auf deren Grundlage die Sender dann selber tätig werden können. Die Ministerpräsidentinnen und Präsidenten sollten künftig keine konkreten Konzepte für einzelne Angebote mehr diskutieren und bewerten. Besser ist, sie schreiben, was sie von den Sendern inhaltlich und strategisch erwarten und statten sie dafür mit einem Budget aus, das ihnen die Erreichung dieser Ziele ermöglicht, aber zugleich die Freiheit lässt, die dafür besten Programminhalte und Verbreitungswege selbst festzulegen. Wenn wir dieses Budget noch vernünftig indexieren würden und der Kommission zur Ermittlung des Finanzbedarfs der Rundfunkanstalten die Überwachung und Gestaltung dieses Prozesses überließen, wäre das ein Ausweg aus einer aktuell eher verzweifelt wirkenden politischen Diskussion. Es wäre ein neuer Deal, der mehr Freiheit mit mehr wirtschaftlicher Verantwortung verknüpft und die Konkurrenz zwischen privaten und öffentlich-rechtlichen Medien beleben könnte. Verantwortung für ein vorgegebenes Budget setzt Anreize für wirtschaftliches Handeln und bietet die Möglichkeit, Neues zu entwickeln, indem Altes eingestellt wird. Meine Damen und Herren, Regulierung sollte den politischen, gesellschaftlichen und rechtlichen Rahmen des Marktes vorgeben und dadurch sein Funktionieren ermöglichen. Ein gutes Beispiel dafür ist die EU-Datenschutzgrundverordnung, die in wenigen Tagen in ganz Europa gilt und damit ein Level Playing Field schafft. Ein weniger gutes Beispiel wäre eine E-Privacy-Verordnung, die nicht nur persönliche Datensouveränität stärkt, sondern so tief in Geschäftsmodelle eingreift, dass es schwierig wird, sie überhaupt aufrechtzuerhalten. Hier wird es in den kommenden Monaten darauf ankommen, Maß und Mitte zu wahren. Es wird darauf ankommen, dass wir eine vernünftige Balance schaffen zwischen den Interessen der Nutzerinnen und Nutzer, der Verlags- und Werbewirtschaft und der Intermediären. Nutzerinnen und Nutzer sollten selbst entscheiden können, wer ihre Daten wofür verwendet. Wir überschreiten aber die Grenze einer Regulierung, wenn wir auch Geschäftsmodelle, die auf einer mit den Nutzern vereinbarten Datennutzung beruhen, faktisch unmöglich machen. Das heißt, wenn eine werbefinanzierte journalistische Seite im Netz künftig nicht mehr sagen kann, dass ihre Inhalte nur denen offen stehen, die im Gegenzug ihre Daten zur Verfügung stellen, dann ist dies keine Regulierung des Marktes im Interesse von Bürgerinnen und Bürgern. Dies wäre ein Eingriff in den Markt und eine Beschränkung der Freiheit derjenigen, die diese Angebote gerne kostenfrei nutzen wollen und mit der Verwendung ihrer Daten zu diesem Zweck auch einverstanden sind. Wem an einer guten demokratischen Öffentlichkeit gelegen ist, der muss berücksichtigen und akzeptieren, dass die Produktion und der Vertrieb journalistischer und kreativer Inhalte eine wirtschaftlich belastbare Grundlage haben müssen. Das darf man in einer traditionellen Handels- und Kaufmannsstadt aussprechen. Und wir wissen aus der Mediengeschichte, dass Geschäfts-, Vertrags- und Pressefreiheit oft Hand in Hand gegangen sind. Deshalb sollten wir den Daten- und Verbraucherschutz, die Meinungs- und Pressefreiheit und die wirtschaftlichen Notwendigkeiten in der Medienwelt bei allen Entscheidungen gleichermaßen berücksichtigen. Die Bundesregierung sollte im Hinblick auf die E-Privacy-Verordnung die Vereinbarung aus ihren Koalitionsverhandlungen ernst nehmen, dass sie künftig nationale und europäische Gesetzgebungsvorhaben noch stärker hinsichtlich ihrer Auswirkungen auf privatwirtschaftliche Medienangebote, wie zum Beispiel durch Werbeverbote, prüfen wird, um gute Rahmenbedingungen für eine vielfältige Medienlandschaft sicherzustellen. Auch die Thematik der Adblocker bewegt sich im Spannungsfeld zwischen Verbraucherschutz und Medienfreiheit. Selbstverständlich steht es jedem frei, Werbung zu blockieren. Aber es ist schon ein denkwürdiges Geschäftsmodell, wenn Anbieter solcher Adblocker zugleich Webseitenbetreibern anbieten, ihre Werbung gegen Zahlung einer Gebühr dann doch verbreiten zu können. Die Länder haben das Problem bereits adressiert und sollten die rechtlichen Möglichkeiten prüfen, um auch hier darauf hinzuwirken, dass Journalismus und andere kreative Leistungen finanzierbar bleiben. Meine Damen und Herren, nachdem wir uns jetzt bis in die Einzelheiten der regulatorischen Probleme in der Medienpolitik vorgearbeitet haben, wollen wir nun der gesellschaftlichen Bedeutung der dahinterstehenden Fragestellungen den Raum und die Ehre geben, die sie verdient. Ich freue mich, dass Frau Professor Zeynep Tufekci bei uns ist. Sie arbeitet an der University of North Carolina und am Berkman Center for Internet and Society in Harvard und ist wie kaum eine zweite Wissenschaftlerin derzeit auch in den praktischen öffentlichen Diskussionen präsent, zuletzt mit ihrem Buch Twitter and Tear Gas, The Power and Fragility of Networked Protest. Sie forscht nicht nur zu den neuen Möglichkeiten digitaler Kommunikation und Vernetzung, sondern sie ist selbst Teilnehmerin an jenen Bewegungen, die Potenziale und Risiken in diesen Feldern ausloten. Ich freue mich auf Ihre Gedanken zur Öffentlichkeit als Aufgabe. Wir haben die wesentlichen Instrumente zur Sicherstellung einer demokratischen Öffentlichkeit in der modernen Medienwelt in der Hand. Wir müssen sie nur anwenden, schrittweise und zielgerichtet. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It is indeed a very interesting time, very complex. I want to start by telling you two stories, and both are stories where I started thinking something and then life made me change my mind. The first one is that I actually didn't want to go into computers. I wanted to be a physicist or some sort of scientist. And like a lot of kids who were interested in physics and science and math, I encountered the problem of nuclear weapons early on. Before, I'm still a kid, I'm thinking I want to go grow up and be a physicist. And then I learned, oh wait, these tools, they can be used for evil. There's all this potential. So when time came to go to college, I needed to get a job quickly as well to be able to afford college. So I thought, why don't I pick a field where I can quickly go to work and I don't have to deal with any ethical issues. So instead of physics, I picked computers and computer programming. So that was not the best idea, because right now, the physicist friends of mine, their big ethical problem is who's going to get the Nobel Prize for the Higgs boson discovery, because thousands of people work on these things, and only 3 people can get the Nobel Prize. So that's their big ethical problem. My people are building killer robots, destabilizing democracies, turning the world upside down and such. So clearly, I ended up in the middle of the ethical issues anyway. So here we are. The second thing I want to tell you guys is that the quote that the first mayor kindly referred to is that I really started out with a lot of hope for these technologies. And I have not lost that hope. I grew up in Turkey. And at the time in Turkey, I grew up under the first military coup. Now, you know how there's a saying among linguists that the Inuit, the Eskimo, have lots of words for snow, allegedly? Well, I don't know about that, but in Turkey we have lots of words for coups, because we have many kinds of them, right? We have military coups, soft coups, harder coups, this coup, that coup. We seem to sort of have a history of this. And the military coup I grew up under also imposed a very heavy model of censorship. If you turned on TV, there's one channel, came on at 7, 8, something like that. You all had to watch the same thing. And there was a lot of US dramas and sitcoms and things like that. I remember watching something called The Little House on the Prairie, which is this American family in what is called the frontier, trying to sort of colonize New America. Something. It made no sense in Turkey. We were watching that because the military censors didn't really want to have real news. In fact, this was how you controlled news in the past. You had a gatekeeper, and then you stopped the gatekeeper, you blocked it, and that was it. In fact, in the 1960 coup, as I said, we have lots of those. In the 1960 coup, the Turkish, that military regime at the time had a challenge because just a couple weeks after that coup, there was a big national soccer match. Now, it's a little bit like that in Europe too, right? You can do lots of things and get away with it. You cannot cancel a big national soccer match. You can, have coups, you can imprison journalists, you can do this, you can do that, you cannot cancel the soccer match. But they had a problem because the soccer match back at the time is broadcast through radio. And so this is how it works, right? Somebody says, and now, left there, let's say, a soccer player is running down the left field and he kicks it to his, they would just narrate the match. But what if the narrator, the anchor, said something against the coup on radio, where everybody would be glued to the radio? So they saw that problem by surrounding the announcer with 3 people with guns to his head. They were like, okay, go ahead, you talk about the match. Just, as long as you don't talk about the military thing, you're fine. He managed somehow, he wasn't very happy about it. He wrote about it in a book. He was a very famous Turkish anchor. And he said, this was not fun. You made me do this with guns to my head. He said, oh, nothing personal. You had a lot of power there. Because he did have some sort of power, right? He held that megaphone, which could talk to the whole nation. Now, the interesting thing is, once the internet came around, I thought, okay, that's it. That censorship is dead. Like, we can get around things, and there won't be censorship, and the authoritarians won't be able to control news and everything. And this is great. Now, I still believe this to be partially true. I don't believe this to be false in the sense that there has been, in some ways, a great democratization of certain kinds of information and data. But this is not some simple, straightforward process. In this transition, what we have shifted is a world in which where we could have a gatekeeper that was based on blocking speech. The announcer could say, just be blocked. Well, literally a gun to his head. And you control that little sort of opening, and you control it. Like, that's how you control speech. In the 21st century, the commodity, the resource that is crucial is attention, not speech necessarily. You can speak, you can put something on the internet. It's kind of hard to stop that. Very few things don't have a home somewhere on the internet. Even horrible, horrible things can go on Tor-hidden servers and find a space. So that's fine. That's not fine, but that's just the way it is. But attention and distraction and misinformation and not being able to tell what's true or what's false, not having credible signals, those are new kinds of censorship and misinformation that are quite effective in novel ways. And to explain this, I'm going to give 2 examples. I'm going to give one example, and then we'll talk about something else. So this is going to be a Facebook example and a US example, but it kind of applies generally. In August of 2014, in the United States, in a town called Ferguson in Missouri, there was an incident in which an African-American teenager was killed by a white police officer. If you're following the news, there is a big movement in the United States since then about this issue, police misconduct, especially with regards to minorities, especially with regards to men. We later had a study from the US Justice Department that showed there was a lot of corruption in the police department in the way it operated in that city too. So things are tense, a young man is dead, a town is grieving. And just by coincidence, there had been a couple of journalists near that town. I believe there was a tornado or something nearby, so they were already there. So they came to the town to cover this protest. Now, we started seeing pictures coming from this town. There's some police, there's some protesters, people are upset, sad, crying. But the protesters were facing armored vehicles. And we were like, whoa, wait, armored vehicles. And there was also people that looked like they were snipers. And we're like, wait, this is suburban United States, what's going on? What had happened is that there's this increasing militarization of police, and they were meeting this grieving town with this overwhelming police force. So two of the journalists that were covering the news at the time, one from Huffington Post and one from LA Times. No, I'm sorry, one from Huffington Post and one from Washington Post, actually. They were sitting at McDonald's charging and getting Wi-Fi, which is what a lot of journalists do. This is how you connect. The police came and said, get out. They're journalists. They're like, why? Why should we get out? They know their rights. And the police was like, all right, we're arresting you, without really sort of saying anything else. And then next we saw was a picture somebody else had taken of them being stuffed into a police wagon. Now, at this point, this had become a huge thing on Twitter. All my friends were talking about it. They're like, what's going on in Ferguson? And after the picture of the journalist being stuffed into a police wagon, my friends in Bahrain were like, hey, this sounds like us. You know, there are people from like Middle East where I have a lot of friends because I study social movements who are watching this and saying, this is also happening in the US. It sounded familiar. So people were outraged and everybody's talking about it. And I thought, let me go check what my friends on Facebook are saying about this. I study social movements. A lot of my friends are involved in studying this. Surely they're following. So I go on Facebook. There's nothing. I said, okay. I go back to Twitter. Everybody's talking about it. Like there's nothing else. Even my friends around the world are like, what's going on in Ferguson? And there's all these pictures coming out, and there's fire going around, and some places are burning. There's tear gas. Like it's this big thing. I go back to Facebook. Nothing. I go on Twitter, everybody's talking about it. I thought maybe my friends on Facebook are different. That kind of doesn't make sense, but okay. Then I remembered that Facebook algorithmically orders what you see, right? It doesn't just show you everything chronologically. Now, in fairness, it really can't show you everything chronologically because you have 15,000 or 1,500 things a day. There's going to be some order. It picks what at the time the algorithm valued as keeping people on the site or whatever criteria they had set it to optimize. And all I was seeing was something called the Ice Bucket Challenge. I don't know if it became a big thing in the US too. People were dumping ice water on their head and donating to a charity doing research into ALS, which is an under-researched disease. Perfectly good cause. It was all of that. And nothing about Ferguson. And then I thought algorithm. And I went and found the setting that switched off the algorithm. Now, to this day, if you use Facebook, that algorithm is hard to switch off. It's buried somewhere. And if you're on mobile, you switch it off, it switches itself back on. Facebook wants to order what it shows you according to how it wants to order it. You have some control, but not a lot, and you have to dig into a lot of controls at the time. And in 2014, you had even less control. All my friends were talking about Ferguson. Facebook's algorithm just wasn't showing it to me. I was just completely sort of blanking on it. What was going on is that it's a platform that at the time only had like as a button. In fact, you go to Facebook campus, you see the sign, One Menlo Park, right? It's got a thumbs up. That's their thing. Do you like this? Like. There are like buttons everywhere around the world. The news from Ferguson was not likable. It was this horrible story. Whereas the Ice Bucket Challenge it's summer, it's August, it's hot, ice water dumping on your head. You tag people, you donate to a charity. The algorithm liked that. If we had lived in a world where Facebook is the news, if its editorial control had been, more complete, it's quite plausible that movement in the United States that led to the Black Lives Matter movement might have never gotten the attention it managed to get. Because what changed in the United States is not the number of killings of African American men. The statistics are pretty stable. It's the attention to the issue. So it's plausible that this algorithmic control would have smothered that attention very early on. Now, there are countries where Facebook is the internet. This is all people have. It's mobile and it's like their main way of internet. So there might never be able to get attention. So what's going on here is not that Facebook people sat down and said, let's smother this movement. Let's make sure that nobody ever hears of it. Rather, you have a bunch of data, and you set the data loose, and you say, all right, optimize to keep these people on site. And when you do that, and you do that through these modern techniques, often called machine learning, deep learning, this is a different way of programming. You're not really giving the computer instructions. What you're doing is you're feeding it tons of data. Lots of data. And then the program crunches, eats the data, and then learns how to make decisions. Crucially, we do not have insight into how these algorithms now make these decisions. So if you told Facebook, go program it to show this or that, it's not how it's working anymore. This is also why all these data privacy and surveillance questions are integrated with the public sphere questions, because to work well, it needs all that data. So what was happening was the algorithm liked the one that we were all clicking on like, and a news story that wasn't very likable, and therefore didn't have people clicking on like and doing the things that the algorithm could interpret as keeping people on the site, it was being disappeared. Now, the second example I want to give is a Google example. And it's YouTube. It's another algorithm. YouTube's recommender algorithm. Do you ever go watch something on YouTube? You start watching something, and there's on the right-hand side, up next, there's recommended videos, and YouTube will just autoplay the next one. In fact, before you finish it, it'll just autoplay it. So because of my own interest in social movements, I started watching. I attended some rallies by the current president, Donald Trump, when he was a candidate. I was following the movement that was supporting him. I was following it on social media. I was following it offline. And when people thought his candidacy was a joke, I was like, no, this is a viable candidacy. He has genuine support, and he's bypassing a lot of gatekeepers and filters through social media. So I was writing in the New York Times at the time, and I was writing these pieces saying, you have to take this candidacy seriously. Do not ignore this. Do not treat this as a joke. So to quote something from one of his speeches, I watched a few of his rallies on YouTube. I'd actually attended the rally. I just wanted to get the quote really right. After I watched a couple of YouTube videos on Trump, YouTube started autoplaying white supremacist, basically Nazi stuff to me. I was like, whoa, right? YouTube's playing Nazi stuff to me. I was kind of taken aback. And I thought maybe there's a correlation here, right? Maybe Donald Trump supporters and there's a correlation here, and this is what they're watching, and I was kind of alarmed. So I started testing this out. I started watching some Hillary Clinton stuff, some Bernie Sanders stuff. And whoa, YouTube would start playing more extreme stuff to me, more left stuff first, and then if you kept watching it, it would go into conspiracy left. I was like, So I started doing these experiments. I would close everything, I would start a new account, I would just sort of start playing around. And I'd be watching a video about being a vegetarian, and YouTube will be like, would you like to watch a video about being vegan? And would start autoplaying it. I would watch a video about jogging, and soon YouTube would be playing videos about ultramarathons to me. It's like you're never, ever hardcore enough for YouTube. Wherever you do, it's like, can you do more? Like, what is going on here, right? What is this algorithm doing? So I started asking around, and it was like clear that nobody had really understood what it was doing. And in fact, people hadn't really completely noticed, but as soon as I started testing and asking, so many other people noticed. So I finally wrote this up. And I don't have access to the kind of data you need, right? YouTube does, I don't, Google does. And my guess of what's happening is this, especially if you're a young person. The idea that there is something more radical, more edgy, more extreme than your original idea is engaging. If you go to Silicon Valley, engagement, right? How many people click, how long they stay, that's how things work. So YouTube's algorithm is optimized to engage you there and to keep you clicking and to keep you watching. It's kind of like appetite. People have a weakness for sugar, salt, fat, which makes perfect sense, right? In your evolutionary history, we didn't live with supermarkets around. You had to hunt, you had to gather, you had to do all of that. So if your ancestors didn't like sugar, salt, and fat, you would be less likely to be here. So it's not a problem by itself, but all of a sudden, plopped in the middle of a world with supermarkets, right? You're kind of like, you have to watch it. You have to say how much sugar, how much salt, how much fat, how to balance, how to eat. I have a treadmill desk. I write while walking. And I think of somebody from the 18th century looking at me like, she's crazy. Like, she's just walking. Why? Not generating electricity. I'm like, well, otherwise I'd be sitting a lot, right? This is what you have to do to adapt to the modern world. Well, that kind of sort of slightly edgier, slightly more extreme stuff, being engaging, is kind of like the sugar, salt, and fat appetite for information, especially for young people. So just a little bit like more edge of where you are. And the algorithm has figured us out. It figured us out. And after I wrote this, in the Times, again, I wrote in the New York Times, there were so many, especially parents who wrote to me and talked of examples where they would let their kids start watching a science YouTube video. And then 2 days later, the kid would come and say, Mom, we never landed on the moon. The evolution never happened. The iceberg didn't sink the Titanic, right? They had gone down the conspiracy hole because YouTube keeps feeding that. So there was a Google engineer who apparently had fought from the inside, according to him, and he says that he was fired because of this. He started sort of collecting and trying to look at this and found that in the top recommended videos before the US election, Donald Trump videos were recommended 6 times more than Hillary Clinton videos, which is a huge shift. Now, once again, this isn't because engineers are sitting and putting their thumb on the scale. They're setting up an algorithm. And if you hate something, the algorithm's like engagement. If you click on it because you think it's horrible and you're just sending to your friends and saying, oh, this is horrible, the algorithm's like engagement. If you like it, the algorithm's like engagement, right? It doesn't have the kind of editorial values that you associate with the control it has. So, and after I wrote this, the Google engineer, he published more big databases that kind of confirmed this. And everybody who kind of looks at it is like, yep, that's what the algorithm's doing. Now, it may be kind of funny to think of children starting to watch science videos and then ending up in conspiracy sites. But YouTube is one of the key information sources of young people around the world. In the United States, half the K through 12, like the primary education system, uses Chromebooks, which are Google products. The computers are just fine, but they come with YouTube very often, unless the administrators figure out how to turn it off. And imagine what this might be doing in a lot of countries. After I wrote this article, a lot of people wrote to me and said, in places like Indonesia, places like India, where YouTube is very influential, this was a way in which people were getting more and more radicalized. And I don't mean in a good way, in an extremist way. They start watching something, and YouTube shows you a more extreme version, and a more extreme version, and a more extreme version. It's the algorithm that's deciding these things. So clearly, these are not a very good way to do something. Now, I want to show you guys, if I may, let's see. Yes, this is me this morning. I never miss a chance to go visit some science things. You know, that kind of couldn't be a physicist because of ethical concerns and ended up in the middle of ethical concerns. This is the European XFEL. It's in Hamburg. It's this amazing, giant sort of lab and X-ray laboratory where they shoot these concentrated X-rays and map out the structure of matter. If anybody from CERN is listening, I'm available for talks near there. So I went there, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, the tunnel, and we wore the hat. Now, you see I'm wearing a badge, but I'm also wearing this little black thing. And that black thing is actually a transponder. If somebody gets lost in the tunnel, they go find you like this. Now, okay, so this is the thing that it's going to shoot into, like this goes for, I believe, a couple of kilometers. Like, so that's cool, very cool. I'm talking to people. Here's the back of it. It's got this enormous amount of data. It's got this, like, it's taking these giant amounts of pictures, like you shoot the beam, there's a diffraction, and you try to use the diffraction to reconstruct what the protein was like, what the molecule was like, if you can do an advanced thing. And I had this very lengthy discussion with the teams on how they separate the signal, the noise, the false, the error patterns, all of that. Okay? So these people aren't dealing with simple problems. They're dealing with enormous amount of data. And they're dealing with real safety issues. And I was just kind of constantly thinking, when I talk about these problems sometimes, and people say, well, this is so hard. What are we supposed to do? You know, YouTube has, I think, like 200 hours for each minute. There's this enormous amount of content. How are we supposed to figure out what our algorithm is doing? And I was just sort of thinking, like, speaking to these science people, well, these people aren't doing simple stuff either. They're doing really complicated science. But they're really motivated to try to do checks and balances so they don't go down a false thing. And they also had these, like that thing is a dose meter. When we went into the tunnel, they make you put on a little dose meter, and when you go out, and there's a key. Like if you take out the key, nothing works because it means you're in the tunnel. They don't want to kill you. And when you get out, you get this reading. If you get no dose, you're fine. All right. So the thing here that I thought was really interesting is they checked. Until I wrote that piece about YouTube, I wasn't aware of anybody who was checking, oh, wait, what is our algorithm doing? And this is kind of ridiculous, right? I understand that this is a complicated situation, but it's kind of ridiculous that we don't have, like, a lab. They're like, do you have any have you been exposed to any harmful rays? They're going to check this. If we have recommender algorithms that are helping shape the ideologies, the minds, the education of billions of people. If we have sorting algorithms, like Facebook's newsfeed, that are shaping so much, it's just not okay to say, oh, it's an algorithm, what can we do? There's a lot of things we can do. There's an enormous amount of things we can do. But what we have to do is try to take this seriously in its own time. So to sort of, I lived in Belgium for a few years as a kid, and I lived near a NATO base. Now, Belgium is, of course, in the middle of France and Germany, and therefore has been run over many, many, many times in the past, right? Kind of like gets in the way. And in the previous world wars, in World War I, World War II, which are kind of fading from memory, but they're really important to remember, communication technologies were crucial to the rise of fascism and rise of authoritarianism. In Germany, it was the films that, you might have read in history books. Leni Riefenstahl was this famous filmmaker. And if you watch any sports, like Olympics, movies, something like that, some of the movie craft that was developed by the Nazis for their propaganda, it's in our current movies because they were good at the craft. And it was influential. In the United States, there was this famous film called Birth of a Nation, which was a very racist, horrible film that had the story of a white woman in peril being threatened by black men kind of story. That helped revive the KKK at the beginning of 20th century. It was very influential. After World War II, both in Europe and in the United States, in the United States too, because there's a lot of academics who had fled the European war, and they helped establish a lot of the communication and sociology and political science departments in the US. A lot of universities in the US became great because of the influx of amazing academics who had fled what was happening in Europe. And they kept thinking, like, how do we do this so that we don't have these new communication technologies aid and abet the rise of fascism and authoritarianism again? Right? There's a lot of thinking about it, and there's a lot of institution building. A lot of things we now take for granted, like the high-quality press, they didn't even exist in the United States. These are post-World War II institutions that people built to protect themselves from dangers that came partly by authoritarianism, fascism, and hate speech, using communication technologies effectively in ways that we didn't really know how to guard against. It might seem kind of funny to us, like, really, a film would have such a big effect on the masses? It did. Especially when technologies are young, they can be quite effective because right now you see an ad, you roll your eyes. Or if you saw something like, The Triumph of the Will, the famous film by Leni Riefenstahl glorifying Hitler and fascism, you just say, oh, this is horrible. But that's because we have the whole education to teach us, and we have developed institutions to guard against that. So to go back to my time in Belgium, when I lived there as a kid, there was, within living memory, World War I and World War II. There were people who were alive who remembered being run over both times. And both wars were, needless to say, horrible. Just unspeakably horrible. And they had been preceded by centuries of war. But by the time I was living in Belgium, we had borderless travel. France and Germany aren't going to go to war. It was in NATO. With one generation, there was this incredible institution building that people are kind of forgetting. It didn't just happen. Right? It didn't just happen. So the question right now is, how do we do this again? We now have these new technologies, just like film in its day, radio in its day, movies in its day. They have really great upsides and potentials too. But they're really open to misuse. They come with the surveillance that would make Stasi blush. Right? The amount of surveillance that's on every one of us, it's beyond any authoritarian government's dream right now. And we're doing this just to sell people stuff. Like, we're just walking down this. The kind of sort of extremization I talked about, we're just doing it so that YouTube can serve us ads of stuff. Like, this is just like, we're walking down this path for very unfounded reasons. This is a dangerous path. And what we're not thinking about enough is, like, how do we build the institutions? How do we build the things that we built after World War II so that never again really meant never again? And the question on the table is, can we do it now before we are moved to act because the world is burning? That's what it took the last time. It took the world burning twice over, and the fear of nuclear weapons, and the shadow of Cold War, to get us together to build the kind of institutions that are currently under threat because people take them for granted. So can we do that before that danger? So I want to end with, I looked up the Willy Brandt quote while Honorable First Mayor was speaking. So I want to just read the rest of it. Nothing happens on its own accord, and very little is lasting. Therefore, be aware of your strengths and the fact that each era requires its own answers. And you really must feel up to its expectations if you hope to achieve good things. And I think that's the challenge before us now. And I think considering what we have done before in Europe, in US and elsewhere, we can do this. We have to take the challenge seriously and act now before we are moved to act by a catastrophe that I hope never happens. Thank you.
Professor Zeynep Tufekci, that's your applause. Thank you very much for these very interesting thoughts, some of which we would like to elaborate a bit further here on the panel, discussing them with you. And first of all, I'd like to also ask the Senator of Culture and Media of Hamburg, Mr. Carsten Broster, to join us here on stage. Thank you. May you... So I think I come in the middle. Oh, sorry. May I say Zeynep, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks again for these very interesting thoughts. A clear pledge, I think, also for more regulation in the end. This is how it ends somehow. Things, yeah. Which raises the question for me. What would the first thing be that you would do in terms of regulation and controlling more algorithms and media organizations like Facebook, Google, Twitter, and so on?
Okay, so I guess I should say by saying that it's not just regulation, right? There's so many things to be done. There is industry self-regulation, right? They can do better. There is regulation that governments can impose, and we have the Gdpr as a big experiment that's going to be coming up soon. There's consumer awareness. We can be aware of what's going on. So there's an enormous amount of things. So if I could like wave a magic wand and make certain things not possible, there are two big things that are going on that I think are fueling a lot of the terrible things. And one of them is the amount of surveillance, the data collection. The amount of surveillance that we are under is mind-blowing, and we are not really used to some of its harms yet. And I think that's something, if we could stop that, that would be great. And the second thing would be, right now we are targeted as individuals, right? That was sort of the big brouhaha over the Cambridge Analytica. People felt like they were being targeted as individuals. Now, I don't know, Cambridge Analytica may have been lying about what it's doing. They seem to be not very trustworthy. But somebody's eventually going to do that. In fact, that's what Facebook does very well. That's what Google does very well, is to target individually. I don't know why, like, it's not written in stone that you have to allow this. So those are two very important things. But the thing is, we can develop these other kinds of ways of doing it, in which Facebook and Google can be fabulously wealthy companies, just not collect as much data and target us this way.
Right. Just to mention that, besides from my work for ARD Aktuell in Hamburg, I also host Germany's only controversial media magazine called Sub, where we also report very often on issues like social media algorithms and so on. We try to get in touch with companies like Facebook and Google and so on. We often find them, to say the least, not very open for discussion. So, Mr. Broster, what is your impression? Because you clearly also have to ask yourself these questions and have to deal with these companies. Do you see that they are open for criticism, or do they reflect on, well, what we heard in the beginning, the difference between, let's say, business and ethics?
Well, I think they're undergoing a process, and they're at different steps in that process. So there are some companies who actually already have a structure on the ground where they're actually people you can talk about regulation, you can have a serious discourse on what is necessary, and you have others that are still evolving and are not at that point yet. And I think the question that we are dealing with at the moment is that most of these companies started out as tech companies. They didn't start out evaluating or reflecting their effect on the public sphere as it is at the moment, and as you pointed out in your speech. But we have to deal with the fact that they do have this effect at the moment and that they will have an increasing effect further on, and we need to deal with this first by acknowledging that they do have this effect and that there is also something that is necessary for us, because the amount of information that we can basically receive at the moment has grown so much because there isn't this initial editorial filter that we used to have 20, 30 years ago. I can look up any information on any given website. I can look up any protocol basically of any parliament in the world at the moment. I couldn't do so 20, 30 years ago. I just had the editorial reflections on this in newspapers and in magazines. So that is the first difference there. And the second thing is then that how does this gatekeeping function? And what kind of rules do we need to impose? And I think you mentioned a lot of different things that we have to talk about. The same way that we have discourses on journalism ethics for decades now, we need the ethics of programmers, and we need to have the reflection in the process of programming an algorithm and setting it out so that we don't have these effects that you pointed out that are probably not aimed at by the platform, but that are just side effects that we need to get out of the system, and that actually, that is my proposition, in the end will harm the platform and the intermediary itself, because it will not strengthen their product when they have this kind of like side effects that then tend to overshadow what they're actually proposing. And then we need to have, and that I think is the most difficult part, we need also to have societal and political regulations there, but then we are dealing with public sphere. And political meddling with the structure of public sphere is always something where, at least in Germany, we shy away in the first and initial phase. So we need to design a framework and not material propositions in the first place.
So listening to you both, I get a very clear impression that you both think, let's say Facebook, to pick an example, it's not a mere platform, as they always say. They are, what are they? Are they a broadcast? Because you can also watch videos. Are they a media organization in general? How would you label them?
So I don't know, because again, we have these new entities, so they don't really fit into the old thing. So I want to be clear on a few things though, right? So I'm always super happy to talk about what Facebook and Google are doing wrong. They're giant companies, they should be doing better. But there has been enormous amount of good that has come out of the digitization of the world, right? So that's the thing to keep in mind, is that this is very, very young. And the technology is really potent. And it's not like, oh, it's just horrible, it's all like this. As you say, the kind of information you can reach, keeping in touch with families, there's this really important good thing. So in the long run, just like the Industrial Revolution, this may turn out to be awesome once we figure out how to deal with all of this. So I don't want to, because the old gatekeepers also left out a lot of people behind. There are a lot of things that didn't really happen.
But just throw in a positive example from my view. I mean, the Arab Spring wouldn't have happened without social media, right?
Correct, although there's ways in which the kind of organizing very fast without infrastructure also weakens movements, right? It lets movements get very big very fast. It also makes them slightly weaker. But the thing here is though, once you have a potent technology like this, like take cars, right? We did not get seat belts and emission controls on cars by itself. And to go back to Willy Brandt, things don't just happen themselves. And the car industry was dragged, kicking and screaming, into establish seat belts and emissions. In fact, they still, because emission controls make how fast you can go doesn't work as well, and that's why Volkswagen was cheating. Because it wanted to go faster than the emission controls would allow. But we got all these controls, and in the end, it was better for the planet, and I don't see the car industry dying, right? It's like a perfectly wealthy thing. So the question is what are the seat belts? What are the airbags? What are the other things of these new kinds of making money, so we don't have the situation. Now, there are two things that get proposed, and I want to kind of throw a twist in both of them. One thing that gets proposed a lot is antitrust, because right now Google and Facebook, at least in the US, I think they're 80–90% of all digital ad money, so there's a real monopoly problem here. But if you just break up Facebook or Google, and then you have 5 little Facebooks, but if the rules of the game haven't changed, you're supposed to collect data and target people, you'll just get 5 ruthless Facebooks, right? So just breaking them up without changing the rules wouldn't change the infrastructure. And the other thing that comes up is GDPR, and there's some big questions there that worry me a little too. Should I?
Yes, please. Go on.
Okay, so here's what I worry about.
Before we move on to another.
Yeah, because with GDPR, and it'll be this great experiment. I am so curious, I'm waiting, and you're already seeing, like if you use Facebook in Europe, you see this thing that comes up and says, here are terms, and if you don't agree with them, you can't use Facebook. We'll see if the courts say you can do this or not. But the way GDPR is structured is looking at data as your personal property. Now, in some sense, that makes sense, right? Because data about me, I should have control over it. This is fine. But there's a way in which that these two giants could get people to turn over their data one by one. Because the data, one by one, turning over just a bit of your data for a little bit of convenience is not a huge harm to you. It might be rational to you in the little sense, but if 1 million people do it, if 100 million people do it, then all that data comes together and it's a harm. So I feel like GDPR's approach is to take data as your thing, which is, it's a good beginning. But in some ways, data is a bit like radioactive waste, right? You can't just say, all right, you can keep a little bit in your, it's a problem that we have to think of like pollution, like what are the public effects of all of it coming together. So rather than just individual consent, I believe that there has to be ways in which we make these companies operate without becoming these giant surveillance machines on us. And I'm not sure GDPR will get us there. It just might get 200 million people to click on consent by promising something or even paying a few euros, and we're where we started.
But that we will see in a couple of months, basically, how it will continue and work, basically. Coming back to another, a thought is, I mean, this is the big business ahead of us. Data trading, also social media companies setting up businesses around the globe. How difficult is it, looking at it from a politician's perspective, to be critical? Because, I mean, you have to attract these business and companies, right?
Well, yes.
We're here in a very closed room. You can speak very freely, you know.
As I always do. No, the thing is that we have all these discussions we have in a twofold way, and actually in everything that we heard this evening, we had both dimensions there. One dimension is the public sphere and the democratic impact, and the other one, of course, is the business impact. And they go hand in hand, and they have something that is intertwined, and that you, of course, can't separate. You can analytically, but not in the end if you're practically on the ground. And so what we think, for example, if you take the city of Hamburg, where we have the German headquarters of Google, of Facebook, of Snap, and others here, and we are happy that we have them here because we are able to have the discussions that we're having at the moment. And you need to have people here in the city to actually have the discussions. And so it actually then helps also in the questions that are concerning the public sphere, which I think are the ones that are more interesting at the end, especially from the level of media policies. And I want to come back for a short moment on your example that you had on Ferguson and Twitter and Facebook, because I think this really points out something that is very important that we haven't actually digested, if you want to say so, as a society at the moment. We receive the communication via social networks and intermediaries in the same way that we did old mass media. So we are thinking there are some people who have the idea that what they are supposed to distribute is of general interest. But we have this thing completely turned upside down, because social media and intermediaries are not about general interest, they're about personal interest. So it's the other way around. But we don't have the mindset and the framing in our own reception of the information that we get there in order to understand that. We are still thinking, as you're thinking, well, this has to be there because it is of general interest, of course, what is happening there, but it doesn't have to be. It's like picking up a tabloid or a yellow press and expecting the leading article examining a problem. They won't be doing this, but we don't have kind of like these categories for different media styles yet. We have to develop them, and we have to probably help by marking and by regulating and by forcing these kind of intermediaries in order to declare themselves of what kind of intermediaries they want to be. Do they want to be of general interest? Do they want to be of special interest? Do they have like a certain slant in what they're presenting as news and as information? I think those are the discussions that we need to have in order to be a little more aware of the selection that is going on there, and then trying to have a different habit of actually receiving their information than we do from now.
No, I'm in this part, let's say, what in legal terms is called advocatus diaboli, the devil's attorney. So this is not my personal approach to it, really. But companies in this case, like big social media companies, would say, well, I mean, then we move somewhere else, or they set up different companies in an authoritarian environment. What you mentioned briefly in the beginning, let's look at China or Russia. They have no reluctance in doing everything that's possible. So in the end, may that lead to a technical or social media backdrop that may in the end harm our economies and our, let's say, the way we want to set up things?
So, a couple of things. They're not, like the big companies, they're not going to abandon US and Europe, right? So if they are made to operate in a new way, just the way the car companies aren't only selling to places where there are no emission controls, because these are fairly rich developed countries, so they're going to stay here, that's for sure. So the question comes up, though, this is an important one, because it's not enough just to sort of protect ourselves. We have to make these companies do better, because as you say, if somebody in Indonesia is not using, say, WhatsApp, they're using WeChat, right? If they're using the Chinese versions of these products. And there we already see quite authoritarian uses for social control. And I want to highlight something about this data surveillance thing and targeting, how it works right now. So if you look at, this was part of what the Cambridge Analytica scandal was about. So if I have somebody's Facebook likes, just their Facebook likes, it is enough to predict things like their sexual orientation, their substance abuse possibility, their personality type. If you have somebody's social media data, you can do a pretty good job of predicting whether or not they're going to be clinically depressed in the next 3 to 6 months before the onset of any depressive symptoms. So a social media company can computationally infer, the likelihood that somebody's going to be depressed before their doctor can, or even they know. There are these subtle things that the machine learning can pick up that you wouldn't know. They can infer the onset of a manic episode in a bipolar person. This is the same kind of technology that can infer people's politics. Who's going to be the troublemaker? Who's going to be the organizer? Who's going to be the dissident? And I have no doubt that in China right now, this is already being used to identify. The same identifying computational inference technology that we here are developing in the West to sell clothes and phones is actually the bedrock of authoritarianism. Like, we're developing this technology just for advertising, and places like China are using this for social control. So there are two things going on here. One, this is crazy. Why are we developing the infrastructure of authoritarianism just to make our ads slightly more effective? This is not good. And Cambridge Analytica scandal was the idea that this would be used for politics. Once again, it's quite plausible that Cambridge Analytica never managed this, but it's going to happen. The second thing is, if we fix our companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Snaps of the world, so that they have a business model that makes sense, then when you go to the rest of the world, hopefully, they can use these products rather than the ones that are directly competing with it and where you have no controls, right? They're directly surveillant, they're directly authoritarian. So it's not just to help us, we need to sort of raise the standards it's kind of like environmental stuff, right? You raise the standards as many places as you can because you got one planet. So it's the same issue.
Just to throw in another example, there was an algorithm, I think, established who could predict when you're going to die. It can tell doctors whether it's useful to treat someone, to continue treating, because the algorithm tells you how high the probability is that person is going to die. That was a story a couple of months ago, I think.
It's a huge problem because sometimes these things are right, sometimes they're wrong. In some ways, it's great. Like you can do pap smear examination better than the human eye, which is great. But what's the error pattern? There's all these like a million questions that we could talk forever. And I think the challenge in front of us is like, how do you deal with it to sort of grab what's good about it and not let it just run loose and have the downsides?
I pass that on to Mr. Broster, also combining that with the question, who is in charge here? I mean, yeah, I mean, is it the EU, is it Germany, is it the US and EU? How does it work? How can it work?
Well, it's like always in media policies, you have a multi-level process, and you will have it here. I think on a global level, the interesting thing is that there used to be this saying in the startup scene that the innovation is done in Israel, in the US they make a business model out of it, and once you come to Europe, they're starting to regulate the idea. Actually, this kind of mockery turns out to be maybe an advantage in the discussions that are ahead of us, because I think what we are, if you look at digitization on a global scale, and you already mentioned it, is that you have three systems competing more and more. And the one is that the pure market-driven system from the US and the big tech companies that are coming from the US. You have the pure state-driven from China that is more and more dominating in the digitization. And the question is whether or not Europe will be able to propose a third model that is more or less society-driven, and that actually takes up all the ideas that we are talking about now, the ethics of public communication and of society and society's interests, into a model of digitization as well that is also regulated in a good way, if you want to say so. And the question is, how are we going to do this? And I think we have to do our work on all the levels. As our first mayor pointed out, we of course have like this dinosaur of media regulation, the Rundfunkstaatsvertrag, 16 Länder drafting a treaty on designing on how we are doing television and radio from the 50s and 60s onwards. But with this instrument, we are actually designing the framework for the public sphere of a democracy of 82 million citizens. Mm-hmm. And so we have a regulatory framework that we should use. And if Europe doesn't move as fast as we want to, then we should start moving in our own society. And when Europe picks up those ideas, even the better. So we just start. The problem that we are dealing at the moment is that we are always waiting for the grand design, for the big scheme. We want to solve all the problems. The problem is that all these new ideas and new communication technologies evolve so fast that if we got the solution for the last technology, we are 2 or 3 technology cycles ahead. So we just, as the first mayor pointed out, we need to be more agile. We need to take short steps. We also need to learn to fail in regulation and then get rid of what failed and go on and on and on. But start dealing with things and start regulating the things that we can regulate, and then see what we can do afterwards, and not just waiting for the grand design that will never be there because technology is too fast and is always escaping us and is doing so for 15 years now, and we are just watching, nodding our heads and saying, well, we should really do something. No, we should act, not really nod our heads and think that we should do something.
Now, I'd like to throw in another aspect, maybe. I'd call it factor X, which is the human being. I mean, now we're talking in very technical terms. Right. How probable is it from your point of view that the human, that we may just divert the evolution of social media into a totally different direction? For example, from my friends around me, they withdraw from Facebook. Mm-hmm. I mean, is it something that can happen on a broader base because people just realize that something is going terribly wrong when you use these, when you focus on social media like this?
A couple of things. One, there's a lot of places in the world where Facebook is the main communication tool. So withdrawing, like I think Fix-It is better than withdrawing because it's so central. And I mean, it's practically a monopoly in many parts of the world, which is another issue to deal with. The second thing is, I think what we have to do is we have to establish the principles. You can't really design the problem. In the US, we have some laws that date from, I'll give you an example that I was talking with this morning, is in the US right now, because of a law that dates to the 1990s, if your email has been on a server for more than 6 months, police can access this without a warrant because it's considered abandoned. Now, in 1990s, when storage was really like tiny, you had to download and delete your email, right? If it was there for 6 months, it probably was abandoned. This is before the era of Gmail and cloud and all of that. So the principle there was the police should not have unreasonable access to your email. The principle is good. Once you try to put that into law and don't update it, you lose the principle. Because right now, like everybody has years and years of their email in the cloud because storage is no longer the same problem. So I think the way to deal with this is that you come together and you discuss what are the principles of a healthy public sphere, the diversity, the quality of information, all the things, the good things. And then you say, okay, it's 2018, how do we get there? And then in 2019, how do we still get there? And the answer will not necessarily be the same. And the problem, of course, here is the time scale by which law and regulation works, and the time scale with which technology gets around your law and regulation are not the same. So maybe there are ongoing commissions. They have the principles, and they have, like every month, they say, okay, here's a new development. And then, as you say, you try something so that the principle that's important is still kept rather than some mechanistic thing, because whatever you do, the company is going to get around it. So to give a technical example, there's a new technology, not new, but there's a mathematical thing called homomorphic encryption. No need for the details. It can let you collect the information and get insights that Google and Facebook needs without kind of being able to decompose the data back into the person. It's kind of like a green technology. It's like solar technology, right? It does what you want in a better way. If oil is cheap, nobody's going to develop the solar technology. You put taxes on oil and all of a sudden you get solar technology and then it gets cheaper. You put some limits on data collection, you put some limits on surveillance, you put limits on targeting. I think there's an enormous amount of innovation that's sitting on the table because these companies are minting money by just crunching the data because there's no controls on them. So the innovation, like sometimes they say if you regulate us, and this is what I hear, like Europe's going to kill innovation. I'm like, no, if we get you regulated, I think maybe finally after 10 years of basically doing the same thing, maybe we'll get some innovation out of Silicon Valley. Right now, honestly, it's a dull, boring place. It's an ad broker. I mean, this is not innovation. They're just crunching data and selling ads. I would like to see more innovation, and for that to happen, there needs to be some limits.
Towards the end, because we started also from the American point of view and how Trump uses Twitter and so on, I think we heard that at the beginning. And you talked about the 3 different spheres that we have on the global stage. Are you afraid that we could end up, in terms of politics, being dependent on digital media like the US is facing it under Trump? Or is Europe totally different in that way?
I'm not quite sure I fully understood the question, because I think in the end all media will be digital. I mean, and all the analog media that we have here in the place will be in a digital way distributed at least. And so the thing is, what we need to be very eager to preserve is the diversity of different media offerings that we still have at the moment. And as we talked about, or at least as the first mayor talked about, that we still have this competition between privately organized media and publicly organized media. And I really think that this is something that we should preserve, because we have 2 different ways, and we need to make sure that both are strong and both have the way and the resources and actually to do their business and actually competing one another on different organizational levels by proposing media offerings that are there for a general public. And then the second thing is that we have to do diligently work on interconnecting all the different opinions that are voiced at the moment via social media and via the platforms that we have now. Because this is the enormous freedom that we have at the moment. Everybody can utter their opinion to a possibly worldwide audience. So that is a freedom that we didn't know. I mean, when I studied journalism 20 years ago, I learned that in order to build up a TV station, you needed to have 1 billion marks at that time, Deutschmarks. That was basically the amount of money. Now, every one of us has with their smartphone the possibility to actually broadcast worldwide live right now from here with no additional costs. So that is the freedom. But how do we connect the dots? How do we design a process in which from all these different opinions that are out there, something like a public discourse, like the talk of a society about what actually matters for a society again re-emerges. This is what we don't deal with at the moment. We don't have the scheme yet to do that. We only have journalists, not only, we have journalists connecting the dots, but the question is how can we use the platforms as well in order to organize the discourse and then have two viable ways, the editorial and the civil society way. And I think that is the great thing that if we design it correctly, we can actually manage this, but for that we need rules. We need rules and regulations in a modest and in a consequential way. And that is what we are dealing with right now. And then we will have media outlets that are digital, but still effective for a democracy.
Zeynep, of course the closing remarks go to you. Now listening to you, what would you like us to go home after the event? Like skeptical, positive, inspired, critical, depressed? I don't know. What's your outlook? Where do you see us down the road? Where will we be in 5 or 10 years? Will we say that it has taken a good turn in the end?
So I want to say, okay, these technologies are so very new. And while I bash Facebook and Google, they're so very young. I mean, Facebook is what, 11 years old now? It's kind of like that. Well, 14. I'm sorry, 14. Google is maybe 20. And they're in over their heads, to be honest. Like, they grew so big, so fast, they're in over their heads. At a similar point in the history of, say, Industrial Revolution or cars or anything, we didn't have any of the safety or something like that. So I'm personally an optimist. And that's why I think the regulation will open up. There's so many other ways that from a computer science perspective, from a technological perspective, we're stuck in this tiny little place, right? They're making money and they're stuck in this tiny little space and we're building authoritarian infrastructure, right? There's all this other design space that I would like to see explored. There's all this creativity that, could be explored. There's all these other ways of using our phones, which are great for so many things, that could be explored. So I would say to people, sometimes people say, oh, it's just too late, we'll never catch up. I'm like, you know what? Somebody in the trenches in 1915 would have never thought European Union would happen, right? You'd never think, if you went to somebody in 1943 or 1947 and said, in 20 years you're going to have all this, they'd be like, you're crazy. Well, it turns out that people adapt really fast. If we build the institutions, we can build the technology, and we're lucky enough that, while the world isn't perfect, we don't have a global war, we have climate change, but we still have some time to try to deal with stuff. So there's a moment in history that is so early. It's just too early to give up and say, we can't do this better. I think we can do so much better. So personally, while I kind of find all these problems because I want them fixed, I actually really think these are all fixable, within reach, doable. Here's my sort of physicist fangirl friend type. If we can detect gravitational waves, we can figure out, how to make Google's algorithm work better. So let's do that.
Professor Tufekci, Senator Broster, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure having you tonight here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for good questions. Thank you.
So I think now begins the socializing part. We have drinks, we have some food, I think, prepared. And of course, Mrs. Tufekci is open for talks later on during the reception now. Thank you very much.